When I opened the tall glass doors of my estate that morning, the last thing I expected was to see a team of event planners unloading white roses, gold arches, champagne towers, and a literal ice sculpture shaped like my sister Olivia's initial O, all without even knocking or asking permission. But that was how life had become, ever since Olivia decided that money made her untouchable. I stood there in my own driveway wearing my old jeans and muddy gardening gloves because, yes, I actually did my own gardening, something Olivia always mocked me for, telling people I played farm girl in my backyard for fun, when the truth was that nature was the only thing that kept me sane after inheriting this estate from Dad, while Olivia inherited just enough to feed her luxury lifestyle, but not enough to fund the delusions she loved parading across social media, so she had developed a habit of treating me like her personal convenience station. I asked the event coordinator what was going on, and she smiled awkwardly, telling me that Olivia booked the grounds for her engagement party, her $85,000 engagement party, and that she assumed I already knew. I almost laughed because if there was anything Olivia would never do, it was informing me of her plans, especially plans that involved using me, my property, and my bank account. As the coordinator listed off the extravagant arrangements Olivia had ordered, imported orchids, a private chef, a string orchestra, drone photography, a red carpet, I stared at the growing chaos on my lawn and wondered at what point my sister decided I didn't deserve basic respect. When she finally arrived in a white SUV, stepping out in a glittering designer tracksuit with sunglasses too big for her face, she didn't greet me. She waved to her event planners like she was royalty and I was invisible, then turned to me finally and said, "Move that hose, it ruins the aesthetic," like this estate wasn't mine, and that hose wasn't part of the garden I had spent years cultivating. I told her calmly that she couldn't host a massive party here without asking, and Olivia rolled her eyes so dramatically I swear they almost fell out of her head. She said, "Why do you care? You don't use this place for anything important," as if the estate wasn't my home, as if it didn't hold memories of Dad teaching us how to plant the first rose bush, as if I didn't spend every morning clipping blossoms he once admired. When her fiancé, Chase, walked up, a man who was charming until you looked closely and realized he was all greed beneath his smile, he wrapped an arm around her waist and said, "Babe, she looks like the gardener," loud enough that the entire setup crew heard, and Olivia laughed, then corrected him loudly, "No, she is the gardener," pointing at me like I wasn't her older sister but a hired worker she found somewhere outside the Home Depot parking lot. Heat burned behind my eyes, but I swallowed it because I learned long ago that reacting only fed her ego. She strutted inside my house, giving the planners instructions about where to put the luxury photo booth and the imported champagne wall. I followed her inside to ask again for a conversation, but she waved her manicured hand and said, "Look, you can stay, but don't embarrass me today, okay? People think you're a little weird." I wanted to tell her the only embarrassment here was her blatant entitlement, but I held it in, watching her twirl around my living room, placing expensive decorations as if she owned the space. I kept noticing the way she kept directing people to move my furniture, touch my things, open my cabinets for glassware, and when I told her she needed to stop, she snapped, "Oh my God, relax. Dad never meant for this place to be yours forever." That sentence hit me like a shove. Dad chose me. He trusted me, not her. But Olivia had rewritten that version of reality in her mind so often that she now believed her own lies. She was the golden child growing up, the one with perfect grades and flawless hair, the one Mom praised publicly and I quietly admired, but as adults, her superiority complex had grown into something monstrous, something that needed an audience, and this engagement party was her latest stage. By noon, trucks filled the driveway, guests began arriving early for rehearsals, and strangers wandered through my home like tourists in a museum. I decided to stay out of the way and continue pruning my hydrangeas, trying to calm my chest before I exploded. That's when I overheard Olivia tell the florist, "Don't listen to her if she says anything, the gardener is sensitive." The gardener. My jaw tightened, but again I stayed silent. The real breaking point came just before the party started. I went inside to change clothes, planning to stay presentable enough to endure the event without giving Olivia anything to mock, and when I walked into the main hall, Olivia stood on top of the staircase rehearsing her entrance like she was starring in a movie. A group of her bridesmaids stood around her, and that's when I heard it, the moment that snapped something inside my chest forever. One bridesmaid asked, "Is your sister helping host?" Olivia scoffed loudly and said, "Host, please. She's just the gardener who lives here for free." The room erupted in laughter. Even Chase laughed. They didn't know I was standing behind the doorway, gripping the frame so hard my knuckles turned white, feeling humiliation spread through my body like fever. For the first time, I didn't swallow it. I didn't let it pass. Something inside me hardened. I stepped into full view and the room went silent except for Olivia's smirk, that cruel smirk she used when she thought she had destroyed me. She said, "You can leave now. This is a classy event. You don't fit the vibe." My heartbeat hammered in my ears. "Get out of my house," I said quietly, but she laughed. She laughed so loud it echoed. She said, "Your house? Honey, you wouldn't last 1 month without the inheritance Dad accidentally gave you." Accidentally. That word told me everything. She believed she deserved all of this, my estate, my money, my respect, without lifting a finger, and she was willing to humiliate me in front of 50 strangers to prove it. She snapped her fingers at me and said, "Go water something." And that was the moment I realized something she would never see coming. Olivia had crossed so many lines that she had forgotten one simple thing. I may stay silent, but I never stay powerless. Because while Olivia was preparing for the most expensive engagement party of her life, she had no idea I had discovered something she desperately wanted to hide, something that would destroy her perfect event, something that would expose her carefully curated image, something that would make this night unforgettable, for all the right reasons for me and all the wrong ones for her. And I was done protecting her, done staying quiet, done being the gardener. Tonight, at her $85K engagement party on my estate, she would finally learn what happens when you push the wrong sister too far. As the night of my sister's extravagant $85,000 engagement continued inside my own estate, the home I inherited, maintained, paid for, lived in, and loved, I stood outside on the stone pathway, wiping away tears I refused to let fall completely, because I knew if I let myself cry, I would break, and once I broke, there would be no putting myself back together again. But as I stood there, breathing deep, the distant sound of laughter from inside drifted toward me, each echoing giggle reminding me of how she pointed at me earlier and said to her guests, "She's just the gardener," as if I was nothing more than hired help, as if the estate that legally belonged to me was merely a backdrop she rented to elevate her dream engagement. And the more I replayed that moment, the more a strange clarity settled over me like a calm, cold wave. I wasn't going to argue with her, I wasn't going to cry in front of her, and I wasn't going to let her use me ever again. Instead, I would end everything she built. The facade, the lies, the fake superiority, the performance she curated for her wealthy friends who only saw what she wanted them to see, and I would end it using nothing but the truth she always tried to bury. I walked back inside, silent and invisible the way she wanted me to be, moving through clusters of guests who didn't even look in my direction because she had painted me as background scenery, a nobody, the quiet groundskeeper who just happened to live on the property. And the irony was almost poetic, because the estate that made her look rich, powerful, and impressive only existed because I fought for it legally after our father passed, fought alone, while she was too busy traveling with her fiancé to bother attending court hearings. And yet here she was, hosting an $85,000 engagement party on land she didn't own, insulting the one person who ensured she had access to it. I kept my eyes forward, heading toward the study, the one room she forbid her guests to enter because it contained all the files, legal documents, and family history that didn't match the story she told the world. And while the party roared on, I opened the heavy wooden door, slipped inside, and locked it behind me before turning on the small desk lamp and taking out the brown accordion folder I had kept hidden for years. The proof she never wanted anyone to see, the truth of who had inherited what, who had been chosen and who had been left out, who our father actually trusted and who he considered too irresponsible to manage anything of value. I slid out the papers, copies of the will, the estate deed, the bank transfers, the closed accounts from years ago when she drained money behind his back, the therapist letter she begged our father not to reveal, and the recordings from the nurse who witnessed their last argument. And as I held all of it in my hands, the weight of years of manipulation felt suddenly lighter. Through the door, I could hear her voice, louder than everyone else's, as she boasted about her family estate, about her generous contribution to renovations, which I paid for entirely, and about how she took care of everything after our father passed, which was the boldest lie of all, because she hadn't even shown up to the funeral sober, hadn't visited him during his final weeks unless she needed money, hadn't helped with arrangements, bills, or emotional support. But now she wanted his legacy as her brand, her aesthetic, her social currency. I tucked the folder under my arm, unlocked the door, and walked back toward the ballroom, where the lights glowed golden and the live musicians played a soft romantic melody. And as I stepped inside, conversations fell to hushed confusion because guests finally noticed me, not as the gardener, but as someone holding something important. My sister spotted me instantly, her face tightening as she stormed forward in her shimmering silver dress, hissing under her breath, "What are you doing? Go back outside. You're embarrassing me." I didn't speak. I simply walked past her and headed toward the small stage near the musicians. The crowd parted slowly, sensing a shift in the air, sensing tension, sensing something bigger than the party they came for. I climbed onto the stage, tapped the microphone once, and the music stopped. Heads turned, murmurs rose, and my sister's heels clicked violently as she stomped forward, reaching up to grab the mic, but I moved it just out of her reach and said calmly, "I won't be long, I just want to clarify something." She froze, everyone did, and for the first time all evening, every set of eyes was on me. "Earlier," I said, my voice steady though my hands trembled slightly around the microphone, "I was introduced as the gardener, as someone who works the grounds, as someone who is here by chance." The audience exchanged puzzled glances, and the whispers grew louder. Her fiancé shifted uncomfortably behind her, rubbing the back of his neck. "I didn't want to do this tonight," I continued, "but since I've been publicly labeled as someone who does not belong, let me share who actually does." I opened the folder. My sister let out a sharp whisper, "Stop, right now." But the room was silent except for the slow, deliberate unfolding of legal paper as I raised the first document. "This," I said, "is our father's will, and according to his own writing, filed, notarized, and verified, the estate we are standing in belongs solely to me." Gasps. A few people turned to stare at her. Her face drained of color, leaving only a smear of bright lipstick, her lips parted in disbelief. "He didn't trust her," I added, lifting the second paper, "because she drained $62,000 from his accounts without permission. He forgave her, but he didn't forget, and he left everything to the child who showed up when it mattered." A loud tremor of murmurs filled the room. Her fiancé stepped back, clearly blindsided, while his wealthy parents stared at my sister with a mixture of disgust and shock. "But I'm not done," I said, my voice lifting above the noise. "She also told everyone she paid for this party, every decoration, musician, meal, and rental, but none of that is true. The payments were pulled automatically from my estate maintenance account, an account she is not legally authorized to use." Her mouth fell open, horror twisting her expression, as her guests who once adored her confidence now looked at her like they were seeing her real her for the first time. In fact, I added, she counted on marrying into money because she has none of her own, her accounts are in the negative, her credit is frozen, and she has lied to every person in this room about her financial status. A woman in the crowd whispered loudly, "Oh my God." Someone else said, "She used her sister's home for image?" Another guest asked, "Why lie about something like that?" And then, perhaps the final blow, her fiancé stepped forward and asked, "Is all of this true?" She sputtered, stammered, glancing wildly around, but the truth had already cracked her perfect mask. "Dad didn't want me to tell you," I continued gently to him, "but he thought you deserved honesty. She wasn't written out of the will because of money. She was written out because she threatened him during his last week alive. He recorded the conversation, the nurse reported it, and I have the transcripts." The room went dead silent, followed by a sharp echo as her fiancé dropped the ring box onto the floor. The sound ricocheted like a gunshot. My sister collapsed to her knees, shaking her head, crying not out of remorse but out of humiliation. Guests backed away from her, some took out their phones, others whispered in disbelief, and I looked at her not with triumph but with the quiet ache of someone who finally stopped allowing herself to be trampled. "You should leave," I said softly. "Take what's yours, which at this estate is nothing." She screamed something incoherent, but security, my security, approached, guiding her gently toward the exit as she sobbed and pleaded with her fiancé, who refused to even look at her. Once she was gone, I turned back to the guests. "The party is over," I said. "I wish you all a safe drive home." And like that, the $85,000 engagement collapsed within minutes. My estate returned to silence, and for the first time in years, I stood in my own home, not as her shadow, not as her backup plan, not as her punching bag, but as the owner she pretended never existed. And the peace that filled the room afterwards was worth far more than the $85,000 she stole. It was worth everything.